Misalignment is the primary reason most content fails to convert attention into trust. Imagine a scenario where a viewer clicks on a video to learn a specific, tangible skill.
Most operators assume viral content scales because it hacks viewer retention through pacing. It doesn't. It scales because it aligns a surface technical problem with a hidden emotional struggle.
Today, we are analyzing the operational architecture of viral scripting. We're looking at a detailed system breakdown from Isaac, a veteran YouTube creator. The objective here is to deconstruct his repeatable workflows, and specifically to examine the tension between algorithmic incentives and long-term leverage.
And this analysis is about signal, not motivation. We are looking at the foundational errors operators make when they attempt to scale their reach. One of the most critical workflow errors identified in this framework is starting with a blank page. If you open a document and just start typing a script, you've already lost.
You've completely lost. The foundation requires immediate alignment between the creator's goal and the viewer's goal. It sounds obvious, but the lack of alignment is the primary reason most content fails to convert attention into trust. Imagine a scenario where a viewer clicks on a video to learn a specific, tangible skill. Their intent is education, but the creator on screen has a different, hidden agenda. They are operating as a guru, and their actual goal is to funnel that viewer toward an overpriced course.
The viewer might not understand the mechanics of a sales funnel, but they immediately sense that misalignment. It creates subconscious friction. The pacing might be fast, the editing might be sharp, but the content feels, well, it feels manufactured, it feels transactional.
Exactly. And to fix that, you have to completely reframe what content actually is. We have to look at this through a lens of strategic depth. A highly effective script is rarely about the technical transfer of information. It is about emotional resonance. That is what we call the dual layer problem. Every successful piece of media operates on two planes simultaneously.
Let's break those two planes down because this is where the leverage actually lives. There is the surface problem and then there is the deeper problem.
The surface problem is the mechanical reason the viewer clicked the thumbnail. It is the logical justification. But the deeper problem is the psychological barrier that is actually holding them back from success. Isaac illustrates this dynamic perfectly. Let's say the video is a tutorial on how to make YouTube shorts. Making the short is the surface problem.
But the deeper problem the viewer is facing is patience. They want overnight success. They are struggling with the grind. Or take a tutorial on video editing software. The surface problem is learning the keystrokes and the timeline. But the deeper problem is overcoming perfectionism. It is the fear of actually finishing the project and putting it out into the world.
When you understand that, your entire scripting workflow changes. You are no longer just delivering a software shortcut. You are designing a system to help someone break a psychological gridlock.
We actually tested something similar. When you only address the mechanical steps without acknowledging the underlying operational friction, adoption always stalls. People consume the information, but their behavior doesn't change and they don't return.
Because the friction wasn't resolved. Subconsciously resolving that deeper emotional struggle is exactly what separates disposable content from a defensible, trusted asset. When you solve the deeper problem, the viewer feels understood. That is how you build a moat around your brand.
But if you are going to solve that deeper problem, you have to actually get the viewer into the room first.
Which brings us to packaging and audience architecture. What is fascinating about this framework is that packaging precedes the script entirely. It dictates the workflow. It isn't an afterthought applied right before publishing. Packaging is every single first impression you present to the market. It is the title, the thumbnail, the hook, and even the infrastructure of your links. If the packaging sets a specific expectation, the script must deliver on that exact promise. If there is a disconnect between the wrapper and the product, the viewer's trust is immediately extracted.
A perfect micro example of this trust architecture is the domain name a creator uses. It seems like a minor detail, but it is a massive structural signal.
It is a critical signal. A lot of operators rely on messy default e-commerce links. You will see a Shopify or Squarespace default link in a video description that looks like a random string of 50 characters. Isaac points out that using these default links is like making your YouTube password public. Highly careless. More importantly, to the viewer's brain, a chaotic link signals transactional risk.
The operational fix for that friction is a clean .store domain. Replacing that messy default string with a direct branded .store link clearly signals your intent to the market. When major operators like Mr. Beast or Dude Perfect sell merchandise, courses, or digital presets, they use .store domains because it is a structural trust signal.
It comes down to reducing cognitive load. When people see that .store link, the ambiguity is removed. They immediately understand the transaction they are entering into. The data backs this up too. A clean .store domain can drive 2 times the visibility simply because it removes the subconscious hesitation to click.
That principle of removing ambiguity extends directly into how you define the audience itself. Before a single word of the script is written, the workflow requires building specific audience avatars. But these aren't your typical marketing personas. They are used to define strict complexity thresholds.
That is a crucial distinction. You aren't just writing down that your viewer is 25 and likes coffee. You are defining exactly what they know and what they do not know. For his scripting tutorials, Isaac breaks down 3 specific avatars. The first is the beginner. This is an operator with under 1,000 subscribers who needs fundamental knowledge on retention metrics and algorithmic behavior.
Then you have the second avatar, which serves as the primary target. This is the intermediate creator. They already understand the basics of the platform, but they have hit a plateau. They are actively seeking new high-level applications to scale their systems.
Finally, there is the outlier avatar. This is someone who doesn't even make videos. They are watching strictly for the entertainment value, the pacing, and the editing aesthetics. Defining these 3 tiers is an operational boundary. You have to know the exact complexity level you can reach before you alienate your core demographic.
Once those boundaries are locked in, the workflow moves to researching the gap. And the mandate here is to avoid assumptions entirely. It does not matter how much of an expert you are in your field. You must execute the research. You have to analyze existing videos, read the current literature, and query language models.
But the objective of this research is entirely counterintuitive. Most people research to see what is already working so they can repeat it. This framework requires you to map what existing videos and AI models have failed to explain. You are looking for the void.
And that specific gap in the market is your leverage point. It becomes the operational anchor for your entire script.
You find the gap, you understand the deeper emotional problem, and you know your complexity threshold. Now you have to structure the arc of the script. This is where the mechanism of the hero's journey is applied. We are talking about taking a 4,000-year-old narrative structure and forcing it onto a standard 10-minute technical tutorial.
It sounds absurd until you look at the mechanics of why it works. The precision of this mapping is incredibly effective. It follows a strict progression that mirrors human psychology. It always begins with the status quo. The creator on screen is a channel, things are functioning, but something feels slightly off. There is a baseline of reality that the viewer recognizes.
Then comes the call to adventure. In a high fantasy movie, this is finding a magical ring. In a technical tutorial, it is as simple as a viewer leaving a comment asking for a specific editing breakdown. It is the catalyst that forces the creator to act.
From there, the creator enters the trials. This is where the actual educational value is delivered. These are the technical steps, the software maps, the inevitable mistakes made along the way. But the framework does not stop at just listing steps. It forces a crisis.
The crisis is where the deeper emotional problem finally hits the surface. Isaac uses a brilliant example. The creator realizes that 60 days have passed, and they're still editing the exact same single video. The surface problem was learning the software. The deeper problem, severe perfectionism, has now caused a full operational crisis.
At this exact crisis point, an identity change is required. The creator has to show vulnerability. They have to look at the camera and admit that their current system is failing. They do not know everything. The reward, or the return in the hero's journey, is the realization that good enough is the actual answer.
They hit publish, the mindset shifts, the cycle completes, and a new status quo is established. The technical tutorial has been successfully wrapped in a narrative of transformation.
There is a massive second-order effect. By forcing a narrative framework onto a technical tutorial, you ensure the viewer sees themselves in that struggle. You're no longer just a source of information. You are a proxy for their own journey. That is the mechanism that transitions an audience from transactional consumers into loyal brand advocates.
But to execute that transition seamlessly, the writing mechanics themselves have to be flawless. You can't just drop a hero's journey onto a page and expect it to flow. The framework outlines specific tactical rules for drafting. First, you expand on each point in your outline without any self-editing. You ignore grammar, you ignore structure, you just get the raw material out of your head and onto the page.
The true leverage, however, comes during the revision process. This is where you apply what is known as the South Park rule. It is a fundamental shift in how you connect ideas. The goal is to avoid linear, predictable writing. You must eliminate the phrase and then from your structural logic.
If you write, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, you are just listing events. It is a timeline, not a story. The pivot is to implement the framework utilized by the writers of South Park. This happens, but this happens. Therefore, this happens.
It shifts the entire script from a mechanism of sequence to a mechanism of causality. When you use but and therefore, every single beat of the script is a direct, forced reaction to the beat before it. You try a new editing technique, but the software crashes, therefore you have to rebuild the project from scratch using a different method.
It builds an unbroken chain of logic and tension.
That tension commands attention, but that attention is incredibly fragile, which introduces a massive strategic risk regarding pacing and the complexity curve. There's a profound temptation for operators to front-load complexity in their scripts to sound smart right out of the gate.
It is an ego trap. If you start breaking down highly advanced abstract concepts in the first 60 seconds, you instantly alienate the majority of the audience who lacks the foundational context. The system demands that you start simple. You establish a baseline understanding that everyone can agree on, and then you gradually increase the complexity.
Isaac's own video is a meta example of this. He starts by talking about basic thumbnail packaging and standard research, very accessible concepts. But by the end, he is scaling up to advanced narrative theory and universe building.
To maintain engagement as that complexity scales, you have to use a specific interactive pacing mechanism, show, don't tell. But in this context, it is not just a creative writing tip, it is an active retention strategy. Instead of lecturing the audience about the concepts, you give them hints. You force the viewer to solve the puzzle alongside you.
He does this by introducing the concept of the deeper problem, but he intentionally refuses to reveal what the deeper problem of his own video actually is. He issues a challenge to the viewer to figure it out before the video ends.
That is a brilliant structural move. It transforms passive viewing into active, high-retention participation. You are no longer watching a lecture, you are participating in a psychological challenge. It changes the power dynamic between the creator and the audience.
To get a script to that level of polish, operators are increasingly turning to AI. But the workflow discussed here exposes a massive flaw in how the market assumes AI should be used. The trap is taking your outline and asking an AI to generate the script for you.
If you ask a machine to originate your voice, the result will always be generic, unusable garbage. It mathematically regresses to the mean of its training data. The actual leverage is using AI as an adversarial editor. You do not ask it to write, you ask it to roast the outline.
You ask it to identify logical gaps, you ask it to point out sections where the pacing drags, or to suggest alternative plot twists that challenge your assumptions.
From what we observed when testing large language models in our own workflows, prompting for critique scales infinitely better than prompting for creation. You use the machine to rigorously stress test your logic and find the blind spots you are too close to see. You never use it to originate the soul of the work.
That concept of the soul of the work brings us to a severe tension identified at the very end of this breakdown. It is the fundamental conflict between algorithmic leverage and structural integrity. Isaac introduces a hypothetical scenario involving an AI retention optimizer.
This is a tool designed to analyze a script and tell you exactly what to change to maximize watch time. In the example, the AI suggests cutting the complex, nuanced, and highly valuable parts of the script and replacing the ending with manufactured rage bait.
The metric the AI promises is stark, a 30% boost in watch time if you implement those manipulative changes. This exposes an overlooked incentive in the current media ecosystem. The platform's sole incentive is sheer retention. It simply wants the viewer staring at the screen for as long as mathematically possible, regardless of how they feel afterward.
But the operator's incentive must be entirely different. The operator's incentive must be long-term trust. There is a massive strategic risk in blindly optimizing for the retention chart. When you do that, you extract leverage directly from yourself. You commoditize your own voice to feed the algorithm.
You strip the soul from the work. You might win the algorithmic battle for a single upload. You might get the spike in views, but you lose the war for audience loyalty because the audience eventually realizes they're being manipulated, not respected.
Isaac actively refuses the 30% boost. He refuses to delete useful information or implement rage bait just to satisfy a chart. And that refusal is the prerequisite for the final, highest-level strategy we need to discuss, the universe strategy.
If you are just chasing individual viral spikes, you are trapped in a repeating cycle. You start at zero every time you publish. The ultimate leverage in this space is treating each video as a single pillar in a grand story.
The analogy used is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For over a decade, Marvel released standalone stories. You could watch Iron Man or Captain America and enjoy them as isolated films. But the true leverage was that every film was connected to a larger narrative, which eventually peaked with massive, culturally dominant events like Endgame.
Operators need to view their content the exact same way. Every video, every essay, every deep dive is connected. The underlying philosophy, the recurring frameworks, the specific terminology you use, they are all breadcrumbs leading the audience toward a unified destination.
It is the transition from being a simple content creator to becoming an architect of a closed ecosystem. When a viewer watches one piece of content, they shouldn't just want to watch the next one. They should want to understand the entire universe you have built. That is how you render algorithmic fluctuations irrelevant.
Let's synthesize this. True virality at scale is not about manipulating attention through rapid editing, sentence length, or rage bait. It is about engineering a repeatable system. It is a system where technical solutions reliably resolve deep emotional friction, built steadily across a connected universe of content.
It forced a hard look at the operational choices we make every day. If algorithmic incentives are designed to optimize for immediate, isolated retention, what structural sacrifices are you currently making to your long-term brand equity just to satisfy the chart?